Bom, estamos ao vivo com a série de Startups Studies e a gente não vai mexer com o capítulo hoje porque tá tarde e a gente falou que quando estiver tarde a gente vai estudar em vez de programar, porque programar faz com que a gente passe dos horários, né? O chat aqui, tudo bem. Creio que esteja tudo correto. Minha voz tá saindo por ali. Tá um frio danado, começou a chover. Estamos a 112 dias de live todo santo dia. E mais um dia, né? Caiu energia, eu acho que ontem. Anteontem, na última live, né? E hoje a gente vai assistir mais um vídeo do Lenny's Podcast. Fiquei na dúvida, eu tô procurando mais sobre CTO, entender melhor as características necessárias que um CTO precisa ter. Eu achei um canal da doutora Grace, acho que é doutora Grace Lee, que fala sobre um pouco desses aspectos. Achei o canal dela bem legal, bem bom. Então ela fala bastante sobre C-levels, né? Leaderships, lessons, etc. Very nice. Honesty is a moral hypocrisy. Interessante o título. Management is a misnomer. Team teacher is a mirror. Expectation is a multiplier. Performance a minimum. Esse é um vídeo legal que a gente pode assistir depois no futuro. É bom porque é curto, mas eu gosto de podcasts e coisas profundas. Tem esse aqui que também eu acho que é legal. Da Susan Chain. E tem uma outra mulher, mas que não tá nessa playlist. Que também fala sobre coisas de liderança e tal. E aí vamos ver esse aqui, Tobi. Provavelmente não vai ver inteiro. Não num só. E ele é founder e CEO do Shopify. Então acho que é bem interessante, né? Shopify. Uma empresa de Ontário, Canadá. Right? Right? 2004. E tem a ver com software. Vai falar dos primeiros princípios, os jogos infinitos e maximizando o potencial humano. Bora lá. Como é que tá o áudio? Vou ver aqui no vídeo, eu nunca vi um feedback em áudio, como é que fica. Aqui eu consigo controlar o áudio aqui, né? Canal. Video here.
By a builder for other builders. Here's the most interesting question I think people can ask builders. What is your energy source? My energy source is dissatisfaction with status quo.
Tá. Tem um delay no YouTube. Não sei como que a galera falou que tá ótimo o som. Tô maluco da cabeça, né? Eles estão doidos. Deixa eu ver.
Like so many books are about this technology leading.
Vamos ver. Muito melhor. Muito melhor. Eu não sei sinceramente. Não sei como que a galera tava ouvindo os vídeos. Ou não estavam, né? Enfim, agora ficou bom. Tô só no YouTube, eu vou deixar aqui assim, né? Por que não? O YouTube rolando aqui também. Tem um feedback visual. Vou voltar do começo.
Your podcast is a
Tem que ter legenda, né? Vou colocar a legenda em português para vocês. Quando fica em português, meus olhos ficam fixos no português. Não é muito bom, mas. Ah, português Brasil agora é o principal, você viu?
podcast by a builder. Your podcast is a podcast by a builder for other builders. Here's the most interesting question I think people can ask builders. What is your energy source? My energy source is dissatisfaction with status quo. Like, so many books are about this technology leading to dystopia. Like, no one who really thinks about this would want to be born into a world 20 years before today. I think today is the dystopia of the future. It behooves us to try to build the kinds of products that lead towards progress.
There's a couple quotes along these lines I've seen that describe the way you think about this stuff. If most people are doing it a certain way, I by default don't want to do it that way.
There's an aesthetic in the world that exists, which is that business people dress in suit and tie. They are speaking much more sophisticated than I do, usually without an accent. They usually have a stick and show dramatically at the chart that is behind them. How much is that aesthetic overlap with outperformance? Pessimism sounds extremely sophisticated. Optimism always sounds dumb, or at least naive. The most powerful, unquantifiable things in the world of business are fun and delight.
I don't know of any other company that operates where the founder has this 100-year vision of where the product needs to go and working backwards from that.
I talk about look in the future and then think backwards a lot, right? Like, it's like, what would we want to have done 20 years ago on this? We have very long-term plans. At 100 years, you can't talk about the sort of software project, but you can't talk about the mission itself.
Ok, tô com muito brilho aqui. Melhorou.
What are the things that will survive for the 80 years that are left on this particular time frame? Like, entrepreneurship is just precious. Shopify exists basically to make entrepreneurship more common.
Is there anything you want to leave listeners with?
I really think that there is not a single person on this planet who is even close to being at their maximum potential. Reminding people of their own potential constantly is actually a wonderful thing to do.
Today, my guest is Tobi Lütke. Tobi is a man who needs no introduction, so I'm going to keep this very short and get you right to this jam-packed conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes, and it helps the podcast
Please, Lenny, don't strike us.
tremendously. With that, I bring you Tobi Lütke. This episode is brought to you by Cinch, the customer communications cloud.
Ok.
Tobi, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here. I'm excited for our conversation.
I've listened to so many of your other interviews. I've talked to a bunch of people that work for you. I want to try to do something a little different. There's a couple themes. There's basically two themes that emerged over and over and over as I've listened to you share advice and interview and in talking to people that work for you. One is thinking from first principles. The other is maximizing human potential. I'm just going to plant these seeds for now. I'm going to not ask about these directly. I'm going to come at these from the side with the many questions that I have for you. And the first question I have is something that I've heard people describe at Shopify called the Tobi tornado.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a start. I like it.
What is the Tobi tornado?
A Tobi tornado, I would say, is like a whole lot of change management or a conversation.
Ele tem um sotaque ali perto da Rússia, né? Nórdico, talvez. Baseado no sobrenome.
Or conflict or real talk compressed into a very short time frame. I see something, it doesn't sound like it's not good. I have a conversation. If that isn't steelman, and it's like I either learn something very quickly about, hey, yeah, I need to update my priors, or cool, let's do it differently. At which point, a project might be stopped, and we get back together in a room, and then we start a new version of a product, and everyone who's currently on the team is no longer of that particular project is no longer on the project, but they are the founders of the next version, which is built differently. And that might be a bit whiplashy for people, but it's also something that, like, I certainly hope that's true. Certainly, what people tell me is also what they appreciate about a company, right? Like, it's kind of like what is best ends up mattering a lot, and so yeah.
Basically, it's you going into chat room being like, "Hey, we're going to end this project. Let's try something else because you've discovered or realized this is a bad idea." What I see when I see this is some people complain about this practice of like, "Oh, Tobi kills a project we've been working on." My lens is you realize we're just wasting time on this thing that is not going to work, and we shouldn't do it. Is there anything there along those lines?
No, this is everything. It's like, look at people. Again, once I imagine something might be not the right thing to work on, I'm either incorrect, at which point this is super important that I understand why, or I'm correct, at which point it's super unfair for letting people work on something that isn't going to make it. There's a third way, which is like, I could also ignore it, but that's like an abdication of my CEO and founder responsibility that I'm like absolutely not willing to make. So that's not a path forward that I see valid. I understand that's what a lot of people choose to do. So yeah, like compressing time is important, and like I think we have fairly limited time in our careers, right? Like, and our careers are not that long. It's if you're lucky, you have 40 years in industry. Most people spend more time in school and then like maybe leave later if they're so lucky that they can. So it's not even that. I think you want to do the maximum amount of things you can be proud of at the end of your career. When you look back, you want to be saying like, hey, holy shit, we shipped this thing, which was absolutely like an incredible contribution to a mission I cared about at a company that was full of other people who cared as much as I did. And probably now at my vintage, sitting and looking back, and also are very proud of working and maybe even thinking of working with me and being really, really glad that we spend time on projects together. And so it's like, none of this happens if like everyone's sort of optimizing a thing that probably shouldn't be there, right? So, and therefore, I think it's the better thing to do.
There's another.
Tá. Isso me lembra alguma coisa que eu tenho que fazer com a Capitu. Que é... Eu estava testando a parte de baixar custo, que é importante. Mas eu acho talvez mais importante que isso é voltar a mexer na plataforma online e permitir que as pessoas possam usar a plataforma online. E usar a minha internet como uma forma de fazer download e upload. Tem que ser feito de uma forma bem segura. Eu vou deixar minha máquina ligada. E o site não vai estar sempre disponível, mas a outra coisa interessante a se fazer lá é ter o conteúdo gerados no passado. Então eu não sei se a gente colocar isso no banco de dados ou não, mas eu acho que faz falta não ter uma plataforma online para mostrar para as pessoas como a Capitu funciona. E para você poder assistir um vídeo com capítulos sem depender que o dono do canal aceite os seus capítulos, né? Então eu acho que isso seria bloqueado. Capitu. Ou botaria no gelo, né? Eu não tenho gelo aqui. Flag share chapters on the platform. Não escrevi mais nada, então não lembro o que é. Big Refactor. And open source. Prompt remove links. Pitch elevator page to download. Melhorar a ponte 4% de tempo. Serviços. licenças, Century, criar conta NAP, animated tree, aqui para fazer, esse aqui foi, não, esse aqui não foi, tinha que buy tokens, que é bom fazer depois também. Eu acho que eu colocaria aqui platform listing all chapters generated e platform play chapters. Já tem mais ou menos isso. E o proxy. Proxy. Na verdade vai funcionar mais como desktop downloader. Uploader. Né? E a parte de WebSocket. We write for WebSocket better UX. We write? Ah, porque era pra testar, né? Nunca abri WebSocket. Se a base não tiver, né? Isso pra base tem um real time, né? Real time. Voltar pro nosso.
Another example along these lines, and by the way, I love this way of describing of compressing it in time to just make a decision, not focus on making it come across the most nicest, kind of sweetest way. Something else I heard along these lines is just when you give feedback to people, when something is not the way that you think it could be or as good as it could be, it's often very direct and often hard to hear. And again, to me, this comes across as you're trying to maximize their potential. You're trying to push them to do something better. Is there anything there that you think is a way of approaching feedback?
I really, really, really think that there is not a single person on this planet who is even close to being at their maximum potential. Like, I just think everyone is like way, 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 way better than they think. And the reason why we're not performing at this level is a series of ideas, maybe certain approaches for cultivating our skills and our crafts that have not yet been discovered, and therefore we could not take advantage of them. Very often it's honestly just like, it's an environment that just narrows the focus on fairly unambitious things, at which point you get stuck competing with literally everyone else in the world because everyone's unambitious. And so I have found that reminding people of their own potential constantly is actually a wonderful thing to do. And I have a history of being right about people's potential more than they are themselves. Now, in a way, this dooms me fairly often to be disappointed, right? In myself. By the way, I'm talking about myself here too. Like, I think I have way more potential than what I bring to bear, and I hate that. So, like, I'm trying to cultivate the skills that I need for tomorrow, and constantly challenge myself. But I'm harder on myself than on anyone else, and then I'm by some discount rate act equally to the people around me, especially the ones who just so obviously are brilliant. And so spending longer time in careers with people and then holding them to a high standard means but they accomplish very often things that just they didn't imagine they could. And it's to me, this is the most wonderful thing to see. And frankly, this is like a through line for all of my career, because my product is that. I want my product to cause people to be more successful than they thought they could, and in fact become more ambitious about what they are building with their online stores and their businesses than they actually initially set out to do. Because something like this happens.
Não, o que eu tô ouvindo dele é que não tem nada a ver com o que ele tá dizendo. O que eu tô entendendo por trás do que ele tá dizendo é que Shopify, a essência do Shopify tá atrelada a algo que ele busca, né? Que é se maximizar o potencial humano. E através disso, a Shopify ou foi criada ou ele usa essa vontade que ele tem. Se a gente pensar na Capture AI e pensar em alguma característica que eu busco ou tenho, talvez a parte de pesquisa, research, essa vontade e curiosidade incessante de buscar coisas novas, como eu poderia trazer essa vontade para a Capture? Então, a Capture não seria só uma geradora de capítulos, mas também ajudaria não fazer research, mas trazer novos insights, talvez trazer novas visões, né? Como eu estou fazendo com esse vídeo nesse momento? Talvez.
To me, right? Like I started a snowboard store at some point, but I didn't set out to build Shopify. I built Shopify because if
Ele
you
começou com uma loja de
didn't
snowboard,
set
é?
out to do building with their online stores and their businesses than they actually initially set out to do. Because something like this happened to me, right? Like I started a snowboard store at some point, but I didn't set out to build Shopify. I built Shopify because if you are committed to following your curiosity as to the next step and optimize for maximum amount of learning when you choose these steps, it takes you from one place to another, and you actually realize the world's full of lies about human potential and progress. And maybe maybe people are not malicious about it, but they're definitely confused about it. Like school teaches you that you have to learn this particular piece of math in this 12-month period. And it doesn't matter how much you understand it. It's like the outcome can be variable, and we will grade you on a variable outcome for a fixed amount of time, which like has nothing to do with anything I've ever seen or learned or like witnessed about how to actually learn things. You follow that thread, and you just find that there is no speed limit for personal growth, and just I find that like in a way Shopify has been a wonderful experimental lab for this sort of conviction. And I've just seen this to come to be true. And of course, hearing from someone that you respect that, hey, like I think you had it in you to do this thing like significantly better, because I think you probably saw fairly early in the project this sort of path A, path B, and you chose path B potentially out of convenience, even though you knew that wasn't the right thing. And like I actually expected better of you, and like I expected, like I think the next time this happens in your career, you should go path like A, because based on your conviction, and therefore that's hard to hear, right? Because it's right, and but it's also extremely valuable, right? And so what I love is like an environment of people who are holding each other accountable to the
É, o que ele tá falando dá pra aplicar pra Capture também, que é... Eu escolhi criar a versão desktop porque era mais conveniente, né? Porque eu queria um resultado. Mas antes mesmo dele falar tudo isso, eu já tava sentindo isso mesmo. Tipo, o ideal é versão web, né? Capture tem que ter uma versão, tipo... Hoje eu não consigo apresentar Capture pra ninguém se eu estiver fora de casa. Porque não tem como ficar carregando um desktop, no notebook. Se eu tiver no celular, eu consigo mostrar pra alguém. fazer um teste, né? Pegar um vídeo curto e mostrar, ou mostrar capítulos que já foram gerados, ou mostrar a refinação de capítulos. Então talvez pra gente expandir mesmo o uso da Captu, talvez seja interessante. E a gente pode cobrar um preço mais caro para quem usa a versão web pela conveniência. Levando em consideração que ele já falou de conveniência. Para que a gente redistribua esse valor para as pessoas que tiveram a versão desktop. Eu acho que faz sentido. Até porque todo o processo com desktop não foi em vão e não é em vão, porque ele ajudou a refinar os servidores, né? Mas a gente chegou agora num ponto onde, se a gente continuar colocando energia só no desktop, aí eu acho que vai ser um desperdício de energia.
Actual potential rather than sort of their current level plus some I don't know, little bit extra.
There's so many threads I want to follow here. The example of the school is such a pertinent one to me right now. We're looking at preschools for our son, and they're describing their education philosophy. I'm like, I don't know why I should believe this is the right approach, and it makes me just want to spend all this time researching what education approach works. I know it's just preschool and maybe not as critical yet.
Do you have a bet yet? Because, like, I mean, obviously, I have 3 kids too, and this is sort of a kind of decision every parent faces, right? Like, the interesting business analogy here is so many of your listeners are probably product managers of machine learning projects that maybe this resonates. But like, so there's a funny thing about machine learning, which you're just like you train on a lot of data, and hopefully you get something that predicts the thing you want it to predict correctly out of it. The biggest problem of this is overfitting, right? Like, so you end up defining a what does good look like, a loss function, and which is a heuristic, because it's not the actual task that the thing will do in the future. It's something that proxies to the task that you want the thing to do in the future. Predict fraud, predict the next word, whatever. So overfitting is basically model learning how to cheat on the benchmark, on the fitness function. So there's a business analogy of this, which is that, or not actually analogy, it's called Goodhart's law. It's literally the same thing as overfitting, just for businesses. Goodhart's law just says any metric that becomes a goal ceases to be a good metric. Same exact thing. Like the universal truths are things that almost any competitive field will invent for itself by different terminology often. And I think this is also, by the way, why it's so interesting to focus on personal growth and learning a lot about a lot, because you end up finding these sort of hidden harmonies behind things, the things that are clearly enduring, correct insights. So overfitting, Goodhart's law, the same thing. Like, school optimizes for what?
Ele tá falando good hearts, lei do bom coração bom, né? Não good hearts.
Marks, supposedly, right? Like, in fact, overfitting in school is literally the kids cheating to get marks, right? Like, so
tudo se deu a volta para dizer sobre como na escola ensina só as crianças a bater uma meta, que na verdade é para tirar uma nota, mas enfim, para ele é como se fosse trapaça.
So there's yet another
Marcas ali, no caso, seria metas.
analogy. What is, however, the right loss function for children?
Ele fala de loss function, tem a ver com a analogia com AI.
Have you made a decision yet?
No, I have not. We just started down this path. You tell me.
It's the kind of thing
where to
like,
send them.
you need like you have to actually go fairly deep in philosophy to figure this out, and then again afterwards you can find the schools that you like. Just like supplying this for us it was just maintaining curiosity. I like this is a completely different goal from being good at marks.
Para mim é uma resposta muito simples, né? Escola antroposófica, pedagogia Waldorf. Simples assim.
But like I just think like everyone's born extremely curious, and school has a habit of getting it out of kids. Literally, there's a foundation model of a child, and you fine tune it on school, and like it just like loses the neurons of curiosity because it's like it's actually discouraged to meander into other topics and explore them just because they're interesting. I don't know. This is sort of not like the beat of a podcast, but like I just think about this a lot. It's like it's funny how these kind of things just recur constantly.
So when Archie was on the podcast, he's the head of growth at Shopify. I don't know if that's his official role, basically drives a lot of the growth. He talked about how the core product team, outside of the growth team, operates without KPIs, without specific goals, and decisions are
Operava sem KPI, KPI,
driven by
metas e decisões específicas.
taste.
Eu sou o cara que sempre ouvi essas técnicas, ferramentas, frameworks. Já tentei aplicar, mas nunca me fez muito sentido. Então eu tô bem curioso para saber como que é operar sem KPIs. Tem algum edge cases.
And intuition, primarily you and Glenn and some other leaders. And a lot of people heard that and they're like, I don't believe that. Second of all, how does one operate that way when there's no data to tell us exactly what is right and good? So the question I have is just how does one operate in that way successfully? Like, what does it take for a company to work that way? Because a lot of people will try it and fail.
This is very close to what I just talked about with overfitting. But Goodhart's law is real. The moment you create, the moment a metric becomes a goal, it's no longer a useful metric, right? That's I think more or less a precise.
Tá, o que tá dizendo que essa lei do bom coração é quando uma métrica se torna uma meta, a métrica se torna inútil. Faz um pouco de sentido, né? Porque você agora quer bater. Porque agora você pode influenciar a métrica, ela não serve mais para medir, né?
Voting. Why? Because no metric by itself is a complete heuristic for.
Completo heurística ali que ele falou ali.
A complex business, because business are complex. There's a million of different tensions in the company, and you can't all keep them in harmony by optimizing for one thing. So it's true that we don't have KPIs and we don't have like at least OKRs in the sort of Silicon Valley sense.
OKR também não.
But we are extremely data informed. We've invested enormous amounts of money and time into systems that give us basically everything on our fingertips. I sometimes demo this to other founders, and they're kind of like completely bowled over by the way we can dig into basically every constituent atomic bit part that makes up the cohort that just got formed 15 minutes ago, but at the end of a quarter or month or week. And so it's actually that what Shopify attempts to do is to, and in a lot of different places, this is one of them, but also in its products, is just not overfitting for the quantifiable, because I think there is, like, again, this is one of those things, everyone competes for everything that's highly quantifiable, because it's like, it really, it's kind of fun. It's like a game. It's like you tweak a number, and like 0.1 more is like better than 0.1 less. And so like that's an immediate gratification thing. But like I just think the overlap of most valuable things you can do with a product and the things that happen to be fully quantifiable is like maybe 20%, which leaves 80% of the value space unaddressable by the people who only look at the quantifiable things. So what actually happens is Shopify is comfortable with the unquantifiable things such as taste, quality, passion, love, hate. Like it's like the strong emotions that people have. The sort of deep satisfaction that a craftsperson feels when they've done a job well is actually better proxy, if you allow it to be, than the do the unit test pass? The unit tests might not pass, and the unit tests will pass 15 minutes later because we fix them or adjust the one or two things, so they support us. The growth numbers we're looking for, we have systems that tell us exactly if something goes the wrong way. There's an extremely sophisticated rollouts system in Shopify that forever holds holdouts and correlates everything with everything in every experiment and so on, so on, so on. But we think about it as a cockpit for a pilot. And the decisions are still made by pilots, and we think this leads to better results. It's just like the same with our product. We also ask people to just like not like there's plenty of A/B testing tools and all these kind of things for commerce, and it's of course like really important to figure out what your conversion rates are. But are you representing your brand? Is an unquantifiable question. Are you proud of the thing that you have built? Do you feel it's your own? Right? Like, and so I think there needs to be more acceptance in businesses of the unquantifiable things. One of the most powerful unquantifiable things in the world of business are fun and delight. If people have fun when they're doing something, that is just downstream from so many other things. Like I think that if all the metrics are pointing down, but everyone says, my God, I'm having so much more fun, I think that the very next thing that will happen with some time delay is all metrics will start going up. And so I think that is, and if that doesn't happen, then we adjust course. And then the reason why we specifically don't have OKRs and these kind of things is because if you want to hold the unquantifiables as things that are stable and exist, like that people actually do really defer to them and really actually learn to be okay with someone just saying, hey, this is actually just like really great and we're shipping this, then you need to make certain edits to the business that don't remind everyone too much of the companies they might have come from, which where
Eu escapei um pouco aqui, divergi aqui no pensamento. É difícil de ouvi-lo. De no meio.
want to hold the unquantifiables as things that are stable and exist, like that people actually do really defer to them and really actually learn to be okay with someone just saying, hey, this is actually just like really great and we're shipping this, then you need to make certain edits to the business that don't remind everyone too much of the companies they might have come from, which where the only way to get promoted is by driving the metric up. So it's a bit of a more nuanced conversation, I suppose. Maybe slightly less good on the fortune cookies, saying like Shopify doesn't do OKRs or doesn't do metrics and so on. But it's actually just because the metrics take a support function where we often defer to just more, sometimes a little bit emotional, but like generally less quantifiable things.
I imagine if someone were to hear you describe this, of like focus on joy and fun and love and delight, maybe like it's easy to dismiss that.
Like this, it sounds completely idiotic, right? Like, so this is a funny thing. It's like again, there's an aesthetic in the world that exists, which is that business people dress in suit and tie. They are speaking much more sophisticated.
Se veste em terno e gravata, não sude tailandês.
Than I do, usually without an accent. I have a full head of hair. They talk about metrics. They are in front of PowerPoint presentations. They usually have a stick and show dramatically at the pie chart that is behind them. And highly charismatic, highly like everyone likes. It's just like, so that's our aesthetic. How much is that aesthetic overlap with outperformance? I don't know, but some people pull it off who are like this, but like, I just like, I think the world is sort of stacked to lead us astray based on our stories about what optimal looks like are just so incorrect and so in so many ways. Optimism always sounds dumb.
Otimismo sempre soou burrice.
Or at least naive.
Pelo menos naive. Sei, mas não lembro a palavra em português. Ingênuo.
Pessimism sounds extremely sophisticated.
E mesmo soa muito sofisticado.
Metrics driven sounds extremely sophisticated.
dirigido por métricas, pô, soa muito sofisticado.
Talking about fun sounds like naive. It's just like
Falando sobre diversão parece ser ingênuo.
I've at this point like kind of learned to well, first of all, I've always kind of ignored what people think generally.
Geralmente ele ignora o que as pessoas pensam.
That came pretty natively to me somehow, which I'm very lucky about. But I've now actually learned that almost all the alpha in the world is now in exactly the things that are unobvious but true, and the things that people dismiss as naive or so. I mean, just like the most successful business person on planet Earth is Elon, and he conforms to no idea of what like the most sophisticated business person ought to be like in
Tá falando do Elon Musk agora.
any which way you can imagine.
Falando que Elon Musk também não sabe qual é a maneira.
So it's I think we live in a world where the the most successful business person
A pessoa com maior sucesso é Elon Musk.
planet Earth is Elon, and he conforms to no idea of what like
Confirmou que não tem nenhuma ideia, tipo, não tem a menor ideia.
the most sophisticated business person ought to be like in
Uma pessoa mais sofisticada o negócio deveria ser.
any which way you can imagine. So it's I think we live in a world where the counterfactuals are winning because our because aesthetics are just leading us astray.
This is an awesome segue to the other theme that I wanted to spend some time on, which is thinking from first principles. Elon is the classic example of that. Honestly, I think you're the other most classic example of that these days. And we'll keep talking about all the ways you operate very differently from other companies, which are examples of this. But I want to read a quote from Glenn Coates. He shared with me of how he sees you that gives an interesting lens into your first principles thinking. So here's what he said about you. Tobi is at his heart a true futurist. He's obsessed with the way things should be in the future. Being data-driven is innately being anchored in the way users and technology are behaving today. He's never really said this to me explicitly, but knowing him, I think any design that is drawn primarily from the way things are or were is one that he sees as inferior to one that is skating to the puck of the way things could or should be. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's correct. That's actually really interesting. Your podcast is a podcast by a builder for other builders. Here's the most interesting question I think people can ask builders. It's like, what is your energy source? Where are you getting energy from? I think fundamentally the world exists at room temperature. Almost all companies are sort of running at that, sort of humming along, doesn't do anything. There are certain individuals who can inject heat into businesses. Founders do this very well. All the startups anyone's ever heard of have people who are injecting heat, because if no one would inject heat into the business, at room temperature, you cannot outperform anyone else. You can't be hotter than everyone else if no one's injecting heat into the concern. So fundamentally, there is a injection of energy into companies that comes from founders and the best leaders, like all the people you've had on the podcast from Shopify are the perfect cast of characters of people who are just like exothermic. They are just like wellsprings of energy that leads to all the amazing results that we get to enjoy. So the question is, where does the energy come from? Yeah, and that's another one of those discussions which very quickly goes into the emotions. Actually, so I watched The Last Dance, like the Netflix special of like Michael Jordan a while ago, of course, but there was like one scene where he just like I'm sure this is a super famous story, and he just sort of made up an insult that someone told him, so that he would then go and like just want to destroy them afterwards, which he then of course proceeded to do, because it's hard to imagine anyone more exothermic than him. So we know what his energy source is, right? It's like rivalry. It's potentially it's insult or it's anger, something like this. I am not. Like my energy source is dissatisfaction with status quo. My fundamental belief is all this talk about technology, so many books are about this technology leading to dystopia. You know what dystopia is? Today. like compared to what it will be in 20 years ago, or any, like, and you can play this for any part of human history. I'm not making a future statement. I'm making a almost tautological statement about the experience on planet Earth. Like, no one who really thinks about this would want to be born into a world 20 years before today, rather than today. And so I think today is the dystopia of the future. And I think it behooves us to try to, build the kinds of products that lead towards progress in a
Projects. PGPs.
small way or a big way. But yes, I think if someone comes to me and says, hey, let's go do this thing, and we've looked around and here's how people solve this problem, let's make a good version of that, I'm like, that was not the job. Because everything that you encounter, that like every solution, every product, everything that exists is path dependent. Highly, highly, highly path dependent. And often path
Dependent que ele tá falando é dependente do caminho, pelo que eu entendi.
dependent based on having to make compromises based on things that were true at the time when the decision was made, but are no longer true, right? Like the entire field of, what was it? Like, I forgot the name of the field. Kromsky's field, the linguistic research field. It's like, cool, we now have autoregressive models that are just like, we don't actually need to set up a complete, like, we don't need to research the structure of grammar to be able to make machines also like engage in the spoken word. We actually can just like train on the internet, it turns out. So that was not possible back then because we didn't have the right architecture for this, but now it is. So I think what you have to do is to actually have, when you come up with a new product or you discuss a new product, you have to derive it from first principles. You have to say, how would we solve this problem given every fundamental like building block that we have available right now? For that, to do that, you actually have to understand the power and the composability of all the building blocks that exist right now, which is a tall order. And no one is perfect at this. But so this way, you go ahead and say, okay, cool. So this is how we are implementing this thing. This is how it would be implemented today. And now we can talk ourselves in taking shortcuts. Maybe we should actually start doing it the way everyone else does. Maybe we derived exactly what everyone else does as the correct thing to do. Sometimes there was a lot more wisdom encoded in the status quo than you expect, which is, I think, is super delightful when you figure that out. Like, so when you act on it. But what isn't okay is skipping the exercise and doing the same thing everyone else does, because that is, again, a abdication of product leadership. And so yeah, I would say I become extremely suspicious if I get a pitch to do a good version of the same thing everyone else does, because I just find that in our space specifically, very rarely to be the best solution.
There's a couple quotes along these lines I've seen that describe the way you think about this stuff. If most people are doing it a certain way, I by default don't want to do it that way. And if you want to do something world class, you can't do it like everyone else.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, this is, I don't even think that's an opinion that I hold. I think that's actually like, we're basically in axiom territory here. Like, like if you want to do something better than what exists, you have to do it differently. Like that does not make a statement about if it will be better in like in the end after you do it. It could also be worse, but you can't get something better done if you do the same thing. It's like axiomatically not possible to do. It's like fails Archimedean logic. Yet it's something. You would be amazed how many business plans are actually failing Archimedean logic in this way. Like, let's do a good version of this thing that we've already been doing, and we will capture 1% of a market, and you just like this kind of stuff. It's like, it drives me. I find kind of cute.
Is there an example that you can share of you approaching the problem in this way? I imagine it's constantly happening. You also mentioned like you're born this way, so I think it's hard for someone to just like sit down, learn, think the way Tobi thinks. But I'd love to help people start to approach problems this way. So maybe an example might help.
So I think this is entirely learnable, I think. So I encourage people to just have a practice of like think step by step, essentially, and just do it. It'll become a habit pretty quickly because it's also just outperforms. Examples. I mean, the very first example is like Shopify itself. It's like cool. So there was lots of e-commerce software, and it was all the way it was because of path dependence. Because it was all the way it was because of path dependence.
Your partner. Dependência.
Because everyone who wanted in 2004, 2005, e-commerce was an existing retailer, and therefore they had complex businesses that needed to be ported online, including all of their somewhat Byzantine business logic. I wanted to make e-commerce software that would, do very well on the internet of the future, and I believe that we can make it easier to start new businesses online than it is in the physical world, because the physical world is encumbered by a lot of regulations and also upfront costs for leases and so on. So let's optimize for that case and build something that is so intuitive to use that frustrated people in dead-end careers can spend their lunch breaks making progress towards building their own business, which then eventually allows them to, do it on their own way. And so, being fortunate was FIRES eventually turns out to be a much better prep for also solving all the enterprise cases, because no one had to, enterprise software is overfit to the sales process, which is that it wins the RFPs because it has every feature ever, or at least a way of putting a checkbox next to every RFP line ever. But they're not good, right? Like an RFP is a great example of overfitting in the world of
Tá falando de RP, eu acho.
procurement, because it tells you nothing about the quality of software behind it. So, but honestly, this happens all the time. It's just like we are setting the stage for much higher quality retrieval for the products on Shopify and across Shopify. I think we've been in a local maxima on search, and we think that especially with the advances of the new models, certain things are now possible to do that could not have been done yet, because again of this sort of layers and layers of path dependence, and no one coming and saying, is that the best way to do, and maybe we should rebuild this component periodically. We can now do a better job with search that will lead to much more delightful experiences. And so this is a fun project that this is happening right now in.
I think this is really interesting, because what I'm looking for is kind of like the Tobi algorithm of first principles thinking. Elon's kind of got these famous ways of thinking. He shared one is start with the cost of metal to help you understand how much a rocket should cost, and then he's got this 5-step, first decide, do we need this thing, then figure out how to optimize it, then automate it. What I'm hearing so far, and I'm curious if you've thought about this and if not, this feels like a really good blog post in the near future, is the Tobi first principles algorithm. But I'll share a couple things I've heard so far as you've described it. One is analyze kind of the path that existing solutions have relied on, almost like the assumptions that were true for it to be built back when it was built. And the other is this overfit. What is it overfit for? What is it oversolving that maybe isn't necessary? Is there anything along those lines of just how you approach problems?
This is probably too nerdy technical. You're right that I should figure myself out a little bit. My brain runs on a meta language that isn't directly something I can translate into words. I suppose I think more about things like this in terms of programming constructs, pure functions over state, and I think I think in any moment the best decision to do is I think the perfect product lead is almost like a thermostat for high quality product.
What? Eu disse isso mesmo, tava pensando em outra coisa.
Decision to do is I think the perfect product lead is almost like a thermostat for high quality product.
Não tô falando nada disso.
It's you're saying I would like to build something really, really great, and I'm going to go through a series which is much, much more complex than what a thermostat does, which basically checks the temperature and then makes a decision of aircon or heating. you rederive literally every decision that is valuable, every foundational assumption, every foundational A, B, C direction, and you want to see the observation you've made in the meantime since you last derived the next step, rerunning the entire function over the state that is now updated with higher fidelity information, would you come to the very same thing? Sometimes fairly early in the construct, in the tree of foundational assumptions, like changes made. An example we all had was, beginning of COVID, when we suddenly had shelter in place. Like, so Shopify is like built incredibly good office spaces, and we were a very in-person company, and we've open sourced our floor plans because I think we really added something to the to the understanding of how to put great, like I got a lot of founder energy from my co-founder Daniel to build great collaborative spaces for creative work with lots of sort of happy accidents, people running into each other and so on. Anyway, we were very, 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 very determined on doing that. But somewhere in this construct of nesting functions you have to rerun and foundational assumptions, it's in the stack is the fairly basic boolean of, are people allowed to leave their house? Which was yes. Like, the moment that flips, it's not that just like, okay, over here, let's do the best what we can do. It's actually that the entire tree now moves into a different place. And it can be a very far place difference that you land, because you will make the same quality of decision on every step, but you need to rerun something that like takes you to a completely different like landing zone. And so then this is also easy for us to say, cool, we are going to be remote only forever. Like, let's go. Because we realized that the temporal shelter in place would cause a series of events that would make that the optimal, like best set of trade-offs for the company. And so I think this is like, can I put this into a pithy 5-step algorithm? No, but maybe it resonates with someone who can help me like figure out the like coded English language for this, because it's been nerdy the way I explain it even to me.
This remote work example is something I definitely wanted to touch on, which is, so I'm glad you got there. So in this decision, is there anything more you could share about how you got to that place of like, oh, this Boolean changed, so we should rethink this? Because I know you weren't, I don't know, were you in the shower and just like, oh, wow, we should really go remote because of this? How did that actually come about? And then I want to
ask like not pretty much actually. Yes.
Tobi never stop coding. Embracing disagreement. 100-year vision. Balancing tactics and positioning. Encouraging entrepreneurship. Power of the good UX. Talent stack and unique opportunities. Role of passion in product development. It's also important. Ok. Ficar por aqui, 11 horas, 11h11, para ser mais preciso. Deixa eu ver se meu microfone estava aberto. Tá. Achei bem difícil escutar ele, né? Ele tem uma mente... Não é um bom comunicador, né? Ele disse que a mente dele funciona como uma metalinguagem, é difícil colocar em palavras. Compreendo. Aqui, ó, do Good Heart Law. Foi citado. Tudo que foi citado, né? Muito bom. Referências. Que trabalho, hein? O Capitu podia fazer isso, né? Trazer referências. Livros recomendados. Finite e Infinite Games. Eu vi esse livro esses dias postado na Founder House. Yep. Exatamente. Finite e Infinite Games. There are at least 2 kind of games. É tipo ganha-ganha e ganha-perde, né? The Infinity Game é outro escritor. Simon. The game at the end, Infinity games like football, chess. Ok. Tá interessante. Mas a gente continua depois. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Good heart. Ah, é heart, né? Coração. Coração. Ué, heart. Ah, sobrenome de alguém. Tem Good Winslow também. Não confundir com Good Winslow. Sim, é essa aqui eu lembro. As long discussion grows longer, it's probably the comparison involving as it headers approach one. Exactly. Exactly. Good heart, sobrenome. Ok. Heart's Law. Marshmallow Experiment Stanford. 5-bit Spotify balance with Stripe to give it more easier way to manage money. Monorepo. Ele cita Monorepo. World of Craft. Daniel. Glenn. Brian. Impressionante. Faz manualmente isso. Production and Marketing by Pinem. Olha só, é eles que fazem. Pen Name Consulting. De vender a Capitu pra eles. You might not know your name, but... Oh, uma caneta. You might not know our name, but you have seen our work. Good through the noise. Oh. The Tim Ferriss Show. Little Business Podcast. The Pump. That Wishkoff. Another. We don't just make our clients stand out, we help them set the standard. PNM has been essential in help me. What? Calma aí. PNM tem sido essencial em ajudar a crescer um dos maiores canais de podcast de tecnologia. Se você gostaria de um time que é profissional, meticuloso e muito relevante, aí ó. Um pitch para eles comprar a Capitu. Em $1.000 leva. About work productions contact. Your podcast team. Olha só. Lenny Podcast. Vamos ver. Vou pegar esse aqui. Tem vídeo? Tá. Quero um com vídeo. The only podcast partner you will ever need. Production included. Tá vendo? Descriptions, titling, show notes. AI. Provavelmente eles já estão criando. Provavelmente já estão criando AI. Work. Team Fairy Dance. Tá, cadê o YouTube? YouTube. Pen name. Legal. Vamos para aqui. Muito bem. Seguir o Lenny no LinkedIn e partir. Amanhã. Depois a gente continua. Tenho compromisso amanhã? Eu tenho. Talvez eu faço mais cedo, ó. Live. Tem outros conteúdos muito bons que eu quero assistir. Aqui é
I
muito.
see introversion and extroversion in general.
Aqui é muita coisa, né? Muita coisa. A gente coloca aqui em playlist. Vou colocar vídeos mais assistidos. Como a gente fez da última vez. Ah, esse eu quero assistir, por exemplo, Shape Up Real Life. Já li um pouco do Shape Up no passado. Science fiction has become reality in about another. You cannot find PMF. Why the best leader introverted? 05. Bolt. The Bolt? Ah, esse é interessante. 3 semanas. E é curto, não? Deixa eu ver.
The rate you're growing.
Não, não é. Stack Blitz. Ah, tá, era Bolts. Deixa eu ver o Stack Blitz. Founder and CEO Stack Blitz company behind Bolts. Número 1 AI-based AI coding agent. What? The history. Depois de quase fechando a Stack Blitz, lançou o Bolt no Twitter. Ah, Bolt. E da Stack Blitz estava falindo? É esse aqui? Ah. Estão contratando. Ah lá, Stack Blitz. Estão contratando. Vamos ver. Rails Engineer. Rails? Ruby. Senior Design, Senior Software, TypeScript, Node, Remote. Engineer, GTM, Go-to-Market, Growth Market Lead. Tudo remoto. RevOps. General Inquiries. To be done. Vamos ver esse aqui. Que ninguém liga para Rails, né? Software Engineer. Web Containers Kernel. Rust Web Assembly. Oh, é divertido, hein? Escrever errado, né? Será que não exige, então, Rust? Esse é divertido, hein? Improve Node.js capability with Web Container. Eles inventaram o Web Container? Não, né? Web. Dev environments in your web app. Isso, você pode ter. Compila, loga. Tudo usando Rust. Power Stack Blitz. Ah, foi eles que criaram mesmo. Lindo. Magnífico. Belt. Ok. Investigate support for new languages and runtimes. Compatibility, security, and helping us project node. Really core content helps Rust and community run. Improve it in browser. You must be located in US or CES time zone. Remote dentro de -4. Ou seja, -3 no Brasil, tá safe. Entre 0 e -4. You have a solid understanding of native Node.js APIs. Think more years app development in a web browser, heavily focused on JavaScript, and mais sobre JavaScript do que construindo UIs. Quase um back-end 5 anos, né? E2E Puppeteer, Jest. Thrive in ambiguous environment com high degree of autonomy, ability to learn new technologies and system quickly, empathy, or cluster routine yourself, problem solving skill, communication superpowers, bônus. WebAssembly C++, experiência com Rust, no tasks is too big, too small, not afraid to take tasks outside code role, perpetual learner, não requerido, absolutamente não requerido, um diploma. Já se foi a época, galera, é o que eu digo. Being located in or outdoors that worked in the United States, having all the skill experience listed above, infinite job, just please apply. Legal, hein? Perks 100% remoto, medical, dental and vision covered employee independence for the US, paid parental leave, Stack Blitz, equal opportunity employer. Okay. Diverse, stability. Como é que aplica isso aqui? Ah, na lever. Tá, então vai ser o padrãozinho, né? Resumé. Faz o resumé. Não tenho dica de resumé, mas no LinkedIn você pode encontrar uma galera que tem dica de resumé. Bota os links aqui, LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, Portfólio e alguma informação. Simples. Mais simples que isso, impossível. Aí, galera, oportunidade top, hein? 5 aninhos. Se é menos de 5, não tem problema, como eles disseram, né? E Rails. Ruby. Postgre Redis, HTML, Ability. Mesma coisa. Docker. Bons, né? Bons. Não falou, não tem tempo aqui, não? Tem tempo de experiência. Ainda que seja sênior. Bem aberto, né? Vai receber vaga pra cacete desse jeito. Software Design Engineer. Ok. Muito interessante. Fica a dica. Bolt New. E aqui é um vídeo deles. Como cresceu tão rápido. Vai ser legal isso aqui. Construindo um Spotify clone com Bolt. Expandido nativo mobile apps com Expo. Web Container. Lições aprendidas. Post-launch analysis. Fast small team. Priorization on Bolt. Tooling. PRDs. Integrações de uso de Bolt. Limitations on Bolt. All the PM developers in the AI era. Skills for the future. Upcoming features for the boat. How to get most of the boat. And Eric Jones final thoughts. Nice. Ok. Então ficamos por aqui hoje na Startup Study Series. E fique com Deus. E até amanhã. Valeu.